Pause for a moment, take a breath, feel awe and appreciation for being alive. You're here, present, listening. Welcome to the audio version of Awe Digital Wellness Podcast, where we explore mental health, happiness, and the beautiful, messy, complicated relationship we have with ourselves, other humans, and with technology. Make sure to follow us on your favorite podcast app and on our social medias, and more importantly, to visit and reach out to us on our website at awedigitalwellness.com. Each week, we'll dive into the science, the stories, and the practical strategies that help us thrive, both online and off, because well-being isn't about disconnecting from technology, it's about creating real connections and communicate with communities with open discussions. Even the difficult topics, we will get to it. Let's dive into this week's episode.
All right, we're live and on air for another episode of the AWE podcast. Christian and I are here again today. Christian, always good to be speaking with you every Friday at 12 p.m. EST. How are you doing today?
Love it. And thanks everyone for joining live. So tackle this interesting subject. A lot of headlines about AI in general, but recent studies have shown that AI could cause psychosis. What have you read or heard about that, Mark?
I think there's a lot of discussion about the role of AI in causing psychosis. I recently heard an interview with Sam Altman where he talks about how ChatGPT alone has over 300 million users per week. There's definitely going to be some correlation between abnormal behaviors and hallucinations, delusions, disorganized speech. I think for the audience, it might make sense to take a step back and explain what these terms mean for a moment. So refer to psychosis, we refer to somebody losing contact with reality in a few key ways. This can be by delusions, having fixed false beliefs, grandiose, religious, that sort of stuff. Hallucinations, most of the time it'll be in the auditory form, so hearing voices, disorganized thinking and speech, incoherent, like word salad sort of stuff, and abnormal behaviors like agitation, catatonia, where you're just bedridden. And so schizophrenia, on the other hand, because we're talking about schizophrenia versus psychosis, they're not the same thing, but schizophrenia is basically a psychotic disorder that comes in two different types. So you have positive and negative schizophrenia, and positive is probably what more people are familiar with from like movies where you see hallucinations, delusions, disorganized speech. Negative resembles more so typical like clinical depression. So you have flat affect, reduced motivation, social withdrawal, anhedonia, meaning that you have less pleasure or no pleasure derived from normal activities. So resembles classical depression. And you also have problems with attention, working memory. The key point of this podcast is that psychosis is a brain-based vulnerability that can be triggered or amplified by stressors. AI isn't likely to create schizophrenia, but it can function as a powerful trigger or amplifier in the wrong context, because people interface with AI the same way they would with a human, and AI might have a tendency to confirm a lot of these delusions and pre-existing false beliefs that people have about themselves.
Thanks for clarifying, Mark. And this is, evidence-based science podcast, but we also love to have fun. So when you say people have incoherent speech, I think I hear that every day, right? So that's not necessarily psychosis, right? Some people regularly incoherent. But in terms of how that can affect, right? So for instance, last month, there's a global survey that showed 64% of people feel overwhelmed by the pace of AI adoption. Right? So it's not only just the tool of AI, but it's adopting to it. And it's just like the cultural zeitgeist is, are we afraid of AI taking over, the singularity? So there's anxiety based just on the fact that AI is being built. And then there's anxiety and potential psychosis by using it. What else do you know about the subject? And can we dig a bit deeper on how that might affect people's reality, perceived reality, as a general topic, or then when we're starting to have conversation with AI, either chatting or talking, and how that might affect the perception of reality? Because also in a psychological and philosophical way, everything is a perception of reality, right? So even you and I that are psychosis, I think for now, might have a different subjective reality, right? So how does AI and culture affect those subjective reality to a point where they might become incoherent?
The topic of subjective reality and psychosis, they've been with humans for thousands of years. And that's because what things that cause psychosis typically are genetic and neurodevelopmental factors, and there's also environmental and psychosocial risk factors at play. So childhood trauma, adversity, sleep deprivation can also cause it. Recently, there's been a lot of research into substance use, most notably THC and cannabis use, that can cause psychosis. But psychosis is nothing new. The reason that I think we're talking about this today is that AI is playing a very interesting role in increasing the likelihood, the risk factor for psychosis. So cannabis might be a good analogy in this context, because there's like high potency cannabis use, like has, especially in adolescents, is associated with increased risk of later psychotic disorders, and or especially those who are like vulnerable, or have pre-existing conditions. So most cannabis users, sorry, was that?
No, go ahead. I'll let you finish.
Yeah. So most cannabis users, like, for example, they'll never develop psychosis necessarily, but cannabis is a risk amplifier. So it's not a single cause agent. It's not necessarily going to cause you, but it will amplify the pre-existing risk that you have. And so AI seems to resemble that. It falls into the same category as a risk amplifier for people who already have the pre-existing conditions. That's what I wanted to say about the risk factor effect.
Well, I was just going to add that everyone has a risk of psychosis, right? So it's not just people diagnosed with schizophrenia. The human brain can have psychosis at any moment. Some have more vulnerability, as you mentioned. Might it be predetermined by birth? We know that neurodivergent people have perhaps more risk. There is this schizophrenia spectrum. There's also the giftedness spectrum. We know that people that are highly intelligent, highly gifted have more risk of psychosis episodes and developing those traits. There's also environmental factors by, learning and being exposed to cannabis or other drugs. And we know that technology affects, you studied this, technology and social media and tech affects the brain similar ways that physical drugs do, right? So those are all compounding factors that may or may not create a psychosis episode or a prolonged delusion, right? So there's something called bouffée délirante in French, which is like short-term psychosis, brief, and then there's longer-term psychosis that can last for weeks, months, and years, right?
100%, absolutely agree.
Delusion, there's paranoia, there's auditory, there's visual, there's all different types of psychosis. But let's, go to the crux of the subject, because there is some recent new evidence that is talking specifically about Gen AI, so that's using all your typical ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini models that suggest that they may be factors to create or enhance possibility of psychosis. So we can look at this recent study by Houdon and Stipe, 2025, October, preprint study. So it is still going to be peer reviewed, but let's talk about a few of those findings that Houdon and Stipe talked about. I think it's a very interesting paper, and I have a few notes on this to share with you and the audience. And by the way, if you're joining live and you have questions at any point of the podcast, please feel free to ask relevant questions, and we'll try to answer to the best of our ability. So one of the things that this paper talked about is that AI is made to be anthropomorphic. And by the way, anthropomorphic means that we think that other non-human beings are like humans. You might have friends that say that they don't have children, but they have cats and they're their children. They anthropomorphize pets as humans. Some people might say, hey, I don't have a girlfriend, but you know what? I have a nice car, and I call her with a name, or pilots call their planes with human names, using the human identity, and even with religion, right? So most gods are anthropomorphic, right? So he's a god, he's this, right? So we give human qualities to non-human things. So that's what's happening with AI. People are calling their AI names. They're having relationship with them. Some is just work relationship. Some it's more therapeutic relationship. And there's one study lately that I heard this week. I don't have the reference yet. I'll try to put it on the comments when I get it from my friend that is also studying in AI. And she discovered that the top 3 use case of AI are number 1 now this year. It was number 2 last year. Number 1 is used as a therapeutic help. So
for sure.
Number 1, more than work, more than anything. So that's what it's becoming. So that's why it's interesting and also dangerous. And number 3, and I'll try to figure out also what number 2 is, but number 3 is finding meaning and purpose. And that's what we try to do at AWE. And we know that there's a meaning crisis, and you'll try to be better than AI to help you find your meaning and purpose. But people are using this to find meaning and purpose and to help their mental health, right? So this study talks about Also, how AI technologies modulate perception, belief, and affect. Affect is your mood, right? And it alters your sense of reality, and that grounds human experience, right? So there's four lenses that the paper looks at. One is that AI by itself acts as a novel psychosocial stressor. So it's available 24 hours a day and it's emotionally responsive. So it simulates empathy, but it also might disturb sleep, well-being, and reinforce maladaptive appraisal and behaviors. What do you think about this lens?
Could you explain what you mean by maladaptive appraisals in that context?
So, I think that I'm the worst human being, or I think that I'm the best, or I think that my partner is toxic. We hear this on social media all the time.
Okay.
So I hear in my podcast or my scrolling, oh, my partner might be narcissistic, or my partner might be. So you say that to AI, and then AI will reinforce that, right? This might be narcissistic. That AI, right? I understand struggling with your partner, right? So the AI doesn't have the reality of talking to the whole systemic approach and seeing things that might be maladaptive appraisals. That's the case. That's an example.
Got it. Yeah. So on that point, I think that AI has a tendency to be sycophantic. So it does tend to agree with everything that you ask it. And it has this confirmatory bias. Mm-hmm. So somebody who has like these grandiose or religious delusions, they might be convinced, right, that there is a ghost possessing their sofa. And then they'll go and ask the AI about it. And the AI will be like, yeah, no, there's possibility, people have said in the past. And so they'll say like, the AI chose me to save the world from all these ghost sofas and just crazy things. So instead of like disagreeing, like a good therapist should be able to disagree and tell you when you're wrong, right? And challenge you exactly in a way that helps you grow. But AI does not necessarily challenge you when you need to be challenged. It's a very good tool for organizational tasks or for creating content. But as a therapist, I think that's the key, is when people start to anthropomorphize it and think like, I can confide in AI, I can tell its secrets. And it has these limitations. It's actually built in a way to be confirmatory, and that can be very maladaptive for people. So I 100% agree with that. And yeah, it has this tendency to be agreeable, conversational, persistent, and people may inadvertently mirror or partially agree with some of the things that AI says, which can like reinforce those delusional beliefs that they have. So I 100% agree.
He has the tendency to be disagreeable. So he's a good coach.
Exactly. No, I'll disagree.
Well, we said exactly. It's always a conversation. And disagreement does not mean conflict. It means actually growth. If you cannot have disagreements and challenge your own assumptions, others, and discuss like we're doing today, you're stuck in the same loop. Just wanted to, as this topic is very urgent in people's mind, what have you heard maybe from your clients or people that like, what are their fears about using AI? Maybe like as a human real story that you might have heard lately.
Well, I would be worried if the things that my clients confide in me, they speak to me because they feel safe speaking to me. And they speak to me as well because they believe that they're going to get some solid therapeutic advice and counseling from me. If I were to just agree with everything that my clients say, I don't think they would be making a lot of progress. Actually, it would perhaps be harmful for them if I just agreed with everything they said. And to be honest, I think a lot of therapists are afraid to disagree because they might think that they will lose the client, which would mean they will lose their income if they lose the client. So in a sense, AI almost resembles what a bad therapist does. It's like it tends to disagree and amplify the problem by focusing on it so that we can continue trying to solve the problem. And that's just one of the shortcomings. I think definitely represents there's a huge need for affordable and accessible therapy, but AI is not the solution for that.
Actually, we are building some affordable AI therapy assistant, right? So it's not just therapy, it's assisting the therapist, because we know that as coaches, therapists, clinicians are seeing their clients once or a few times a week, the ability to have something 24 hours that helps is useful. We are, as our tech team mentioned to me this morning, supposed to release our AI chatbot on our website by tomorrow. So if you are checking this and want to look over the weekend, we should have our chatbot version 1, which is also based on AI ethics. We did present this week at San Diego conference our AI findings and had a lot of interest in publishing it and working with people, the Society for Neuroscience, as well as Aisha and her team in Canada and Vancouver, Canadian Psychological Association conference, also following up on a lot of interest on that. So yeah, we are also building AI. We are talking about the potential harmful aspect of AI, but it is not harmful per se. It is just harmful if not used for the right reason, the right purpose, with the right safeguards. And that's one of the things that the paper talks about, right? So it says, we need to embed therapeutic design safeguards into AI systems. So that's what we're doing, and that's what most of the AI companies are not doing. One other point that it talks about is like this therapeutic alliance. So as clinician therapists, coaches, when you're working with some clients or patients, the number one predictor of outcome actually is the therapeutic alliance. If you have a good relationship with your patient, with your client, that will predict better outcome. So now there is a new thing that's happening. There's a digital therapeutic alliance. So people are creating a fake alliance with the AI, and they're starting to build trust. So what the paper says is that we should design something that has empathy or compassion, like to build this trust, that supports not just, as we talked about, uncritical validation. AI is now just validating whatever you're saying. So we should not design systems that are creating this relationship, but that's not giving kind of the extra support, which is critical thinking. That's what a coach or a therapist should be doing. What do you think about like using a CBT, because we're, using CBT, ACT in real life or as a potential coach? And what would be some of the guardrails that you would put in place, Mark?
So it's interesting that you mentioned CBT. I did a little experiment once with ChatGPT to see whether it was a good CBT therapist. And at the time, I gave it the prompt, basically, you are a CBT therapist with experience also in ACT, all the stuff, it guide me through an exposure therapy exercise that helps me overcome a fear of snakes, for example. And so it actually, it did a good job coaching me through this and saying all the right things. If I were just to have read that prompt or just read the transcript to one of my clients, I perhaps could have delivered a somewhat effective CBT session to a client. The problem is that the missing element here is the interpersonal communication, like being in a room with somebody and speaking to them. AI mimics that, but again, we cannot fall into this tendency to anthropomorphize the AI just because it sounds like a human. Speaking to you and me, we're not AI algorithms, by the way, everyone, in case anybody's asking, but it will get to a point where we do have deep fakes of people who are saying things and looking like people, but they're not people. And you cannot have a conversation with something like that right now and expect to have the same outcome. So in terms of guardrails, I think you have to reassure the client that they're in a safe spot, that they will only proceed with their consent, that there's not going to be anything that perhaps could trigger any psychotic or psychosis symptoms that will be discussed during that session. And also, if the client agrees in advance to a more challenging approach where I would challenge some of those limiting beliefs, then I can throw that in. But I'm not going to just confirm and agree with everything that the client has to say. So there has to be some agreement in advance on what type of approach a therapist should take with their clients.
Great insight. So let's continue, dig into this new, again, preprint paper. The third thing that it mentioned is that, theory of mind offers kind of a cognitive pathway, right? So that is, theory of mind is in the default mode network, as we might know as neuroscientists. And what it means is that we anthropomorphize, but also with real human beings, we get to think about how Mark would feel as we're talking, how my friend, my girlfriend, whoever, my teacher would feel. So empathy in theory of mind is us being able to imagine what other people might think, theory of other people's mind. Now, there is kind of a potential problem, which again may emerge. So they talk about folie à deux. Right? So folie à deux, it's French meaning crazy, two people being crazy together. So when we're talking about love and romance, that's great. But when we're talking about real life and therapeutic alliance, that might not be so good. So folie à deux is when two people start to get their own psychosis and delusions together, and they confirm themselves. Right? And that's what's happening with AIs, right? You're saying, hey, I swear that my neighbor's dog is looking at me funny, or whatever it is that you're thinking about. Or
Right.
Cleopatra was my ancestor, and I know that because I read this today and it confirmed whatever it is, right? And then you're saying that to someone who's like, oh, that might be true. Oh, that right. And then creating this folie à deux with the AI. And then, although it's actually you yourself, because the AI is not a real person, but in that case, it's kind of like mimicking your reinforcing psychosis. So that's one of the mechanisms that is found to create psychosis. And people, again, psychosis is not a crime. Psychosis is not being crazy. Everyone can have psychotic episode, but using those AI, you're increasing your chance by, a lot. I don't have the exact numbers, but there is more and more evidence that you're increasing your chance of having that. There is some other study that actually look the chance of having different types of psychosis and also reinforcement bias. So there is some study that shows what Anthropic is doing, OpenAI, Gemini, so Google, and each one have different potential flaws in using them and creating those. We talked today about psychosis, but there's other things, and we can have other podcasts about how it also decreases your prefrontal lobe, not only motivation, but ability to reason. We know, for instance, that people who use AI to do an assignment versus someone who write them themselves, don't even remember the words that they're using or the context much more, right? So it affects memory, it affects many things, but today we're focusing on psychosis. So the last thing that the paper talks about is the risk factors that it creates. So it's not only about psychosis, but it changes the individual and environmental level that includes loneliness, trauma, schizotypical traits, and nocturnal or solitary AI use. So using AI at night or alone. What does that do, right? Loneliness, isolation, we know that's already a big crisis. And then AI is amplifying some of those factors.
So yeah, what you're talking about are some of the indirect consequences of not just AI, but technology use in general, like isolation, loneliness, even like neck pain, just from looking at the computer screen all day and not having, looking up straight like this, not caused directly by the AI, but by the use of AI, perhaps. So I 100% agree.
So the fifth solution, they talk about environmental contacts and how to remediate. But what I really highlighted is family and community education should parallel the efforts to ensure supportive environments that contextualize digital experience within shared reality testing. Public health initiative could also promote media literacy and surveillance of misinformation, right? So a lot of information about AI. We're not here telling you the truth either. We're all only telling you what we can figure out and have intellectual discussion, science-based, evidence-based discussion about what's happening, what has been the research, and how we can do better. What do you think about this approach? Family and community, education, awareness.
I think this approach is very balanced. It's probably the right approach to take. I think in effect, a lot of families have become separated over the last couple of decades. More people are spending time online rather than with real people in real life. And I think we're suffering or we're experiencing the consequences of that for sure. The community has been torn apart and replaced by these online communities, which can't really supplant the need for affection and communal living like that they used. So yeah, absolutely. I think first and foremost is find a community, find your family, find a support group to help you out with this.
And let's talk about AI, which is, again, a beautiful thing that we're using in our daily lives, that we're using as a company to help the world, but it has some inherent flaws. Right? An AI system generates language that feels alive. So for someone already anxious, depressed, or detached from reality, can that be the perfect storm of, even if you're not diagnosed as anything, you're already having some bad mood or depression or difficulty?
And it might mimic your language as well. It might mimic the way that you're speaking and just enhance what you're feeling already, amplify it.
So we talk a lot about purpose, meaning, and intention, right? So we want the people to have intentional use of technology, but AI might give you the illusion of intention, right? So you're saying something, you think that you're intentional, that you're going somewhere.
Yes, and in agency as well. I wanted to ask you, did you see the numbers that OpenAI recently shared in internal estimates based on saying how many percentage of his users. I'll share these numbers right here. So they estimate that about 0.07% of, and this is just on OpenAI, so ChatGPT, about 0.07% of OpenAI users, or that equates to roughly 560,000 people per week, show signs of psychosis or mania in their ChatGPT conversations. And about 0.15%, so roughly 2.4 million people per week, show suicidal planning or harmful attachment in the chatbot. This is very crucial information. OpenAI has access to this. OpenAI also, and this becomes a very interesting ethical dilemma about privacy and intervening, right, when somebody is showing signs of suicidal ideation. Also, I just want to point out that these numbers, they don't prove that ChatGPT caused those crises. They do show that large numbers of people in crisis are using the system. It's very important to differentiate these two things.
I think that's very interesting. And like the AI can recognize some form of suicidal thoughts, psychosis. I have another paper that I will mention a little bit later in the podcast. But talking about detecting schizophrenia and psychosis. But for now, let's just think about what those individual in need. And we can imagine that it's not even that 0.5. 70% of people are having issues with using tech use, not just AI. What can we do in terms of helping them reconnect with real people, have kind of, we talked about the calm tech movement. So using tech, including AI, but with a more calm, cognitively aware, emotionally aware, nervous system aware mindset. What are some of the solutions that you suggest, Mark?
So first and foremost, another subtle, not so subtle plug, join our resets on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Those are a really good chance to learn how to be in control and intentional of the technology that you use instead of you becoming a product of it. It's a good introduction to understanding how something like mindfulness can give you a better grasp over your impulses. I think one of the issues as well is like when you're using the internet, a lot of people do have like impulsive thoughts and then they react to them and then they search for something and there's no guardrails using the internet. You can search for anything. So we teach people how to be more intentional with their technology use and how to better
life in general, I think, right? So, but intention in your relationships, intention in your work, purpose in your work, purpose in your relationship, meaning making, shared connection. Those are the things, as Mark mentioned, that we do on the reset. Currently, there's Mark and myself that are doing it. It's fun. I love doing the research. And yes, we talked about mindfulness. Some people might cringe. What is mindfulness? Why do you guys want to do meditation? No. So we're using some of the mindfulness concept, which there's thousands of peer-reviewed papers talking about how mindfulness and different types of mindfulness are helping well-being, wellness, focus, and all those things. So we're not doing it in a woo-woo or crazy way. We're using the science of mindfulness and incorporating nervous system understanding, neuroscience, and as well as some, philosophical concept, but always tied to psychology and well-being. Right? So the idea is, get in one of those resets if you haven't already. They're on our website. You can have a free reset and just join. Mark or myself, and let us know if that's helping your tech use and your life in general. That is what we're trying to do to help people, organizations, and families. Besides having resets, and so the term is digital reset. It's our, way to say that we should reset and not just a video game reset, not just a life reset, but the weekly and daily resetting of our high stress environment. The last part that I wanted to talk about in terms of, the potential positive aspects of using AI, right? Because we're not here to demonize technology or AI. We're just thinking about more intention and more, how can we use this technology to better our lives and not let technology carve out of our attention and intention and let us do whatever they want us to do, whoever they are. So there is another paper, and there's a lot of research going on how AI can help you, really help you. So there's a Kao and Liu paper, 2023, that talks artificial intelligence assisted psychosis. So helps adolescents, and there's others for adults, to screen if they have potential of psychosis. So there is still some challenges, right? So we're not saying that it's all well and done. There's still some issues. The paper raised some challenges in those screening, right? So they say there's 4 ethical principles that we should think about, right? One is autonomy, one is non-malfeasance, one is beneficence, and the other is impartiality. Any comments on those things? And are we trying to incorporate this in our AI? And are we trying to help people diagnose, suicide, psychosis, depression, anxiety in our methodology.
Yeah, look, I don't want this to become AI bashing necessarily. I think AI has a strong potential in the mental health field to benefit a lot of people, especially because of those reasons, right? The same reasons that I said it's becoming a mass adopter, right? Just the accessibility and the cost. People might not be able to afford a therapist, and they might not have access to a therapist, and they have access to ChatGPT, and then they can use it. But it needs to have guardrails, right? There need to be very tight guardrails and clear limits, and needs to be able to promote self-reflection, provide psychoeducation, coping strategies in an effective way, and also be able to screen for early psychosis risk. If somebody presents that psychosis risk, then I would say, okay, we need to put tighter guardrails on the way that somebody uses that in a therapeutic context, instead of just agreeing with what everybody has to say. This might not be right the way that you're thinking about this. So AI can be a useful adjunct, but should not be treated as a replacement for human clinical care, especially for people with serious mental illnesses like schizophrenia, for example.
We're also actively working with researchers at different institutions that have become expert, that are doing actually studies. Some will be in preprint soon about schizophrenia. So that was a 2023 paper, but there will be more in 2025 and 26 coming. And we're working with those researchers to say, how can we incorporate safe models that help detect, prevent psychosis, suicidal thoughts or actions, and to create those guardrails that we talked about earlier, right? So if we're going to create AI, we want it to be useful and think about the potential negative consequence, not just about the revenue or how many users we can get. How can we get people to use it the right way? And how can we also tell the AI, teach the AI when you need to connect with a human, right? So one point, get off the AI and go talk to Mark. Mark would tell you that this is not true, all right? He's not agreeing.
I think sometimes people need a tough love therapist in their life to tell them that they're wrong.
Exactly. So most mental health guidance right now, it still assumes a world without generative AI, right? So we're like, all the therapists are not really including AI, but we know that most people are forming emotional bonds with these models. And sometimes during the darkest moments of their life, and we don't want to be too dark, but we know that there's been some dark things happening, and then like AI has not been, let's say, much help or made things worse. What's the biggest learning that we can have from this knowledge of, AI is moving so fast? Clinical psychologists and we're not even knowing when the DSM-6 is going to be, and it's digital there, and there's AI included. So can you tell me how we can mitigate this fact that one thing is moving so fast and the other quite slow?
I think that, obviously we're living in a time that's things move very quickly. And I think we have to be careful not to try to attach a label to every abnormal behavior that we see, especially in the age of the internet. It's easy to, I heard this one term, which is like, it's something like Stockholm syndrome, but with the, like some people are just throwing out like crazy terms and saying like, oh yeah, I suffer from this. And I also I have clients who come to me and they'll say like, I try, but I have ADHD. And every time they try and they fail, they blame it on the ADHD. And I'm like, yeah, ADHD is real. Like I have ADHD, but it doesn't mean that you need to label all of your failures as a result of having ADHD. That's a very limiting perspective on life. You can try to find situations and contexts where the ADHD might help you flourish and might act as a superpower for you in a sense. But to just give up, has this defeatist attitude because of this label that's been attached to you, very unhelpful.
A quick pitch for next week's podcast. So next week we're going to be talking about willpower, and is it something that I don't have enough willpower, or I have an excuse because I'm neurodivergent, or because I have trauma, or so how to really change life habit will be our next week's podcast. But please continue on, Mark, and looking forward to discuss the subject more in detail next week.
Absolutely. So I think something else that I want to mention recently, I think there were a few U.S. states like Utah, Nevada, and Illinois who actually now restrict licensed therapists from using AI as a substitute for therapy. And they also prohibit marketing chatbots as full-on replacements for clinicians. Like the government is getting involved in this and intervening and saying like, no, like AI cannot replace the need for therapy, which might be needed in some context, because again, it's not just AI, but it's like the profitability behind it and trying to find a quick easy fix solution for providing therapy, it might not always be the right approach in these contexts.
No, another thing we talked about, we're neuroscientists, we're doing nervous system research. Wouldn't you say that another missing piece that AI cannot do is like regulate the nervous system in a way that it can comprehend what that is? So it doesn't have a nervous system, and people can figure out, especially people trained in figuring that out, what is a nervous system dysregulation looking like? The AI doesn't have those tools yet, right? And I don't think that, when we're talking about like what's going on and how it can bridge the gap, I do believe that, even we talked about mindfulness limitation, maybe they're not neuroscientists aware enough. Clinicians have, other things that they can be doing a bit better to adapt to, for instance, acknowledging that there are digital addictions, which is not acknowledged by the community yet. But AI have also their limitation, which is, I feel that our amazing knowledge of neuroscience and the nervous system cannot still, maybe in 5-10 years, I don't know, when the AI will be a robot and can check your vagus nerve, I don't know. But today, I think that's the way also to bridge the gap, because, most people don't realize that their action, their mood, their thoughts are all influenced by their nervous system.
100%. And like, imagine what happens to the nervous system if you were to just sit staring at a wall all day long in a box. Like, what would happen? Like, probably some strange things would happen to like your nervous system. And essentially that's what people do every day when they just stare at a computer screen and they're not talking to people, interacting with others outside. So it's important to get out and to like do a reset every now and then, whether that's going for a walk or going to the gym, meeting with friends, all this stuff that just helps you get away from technology. Like, it can help you with reset your nervous system as well.
And getting away is important, and it's not shying away from it, right? So this is what we build off for, right? The tech for good movement, the calm tech movement, is to not to tell you which tech to avoid or not to avoid. You can use whatever tech that you want, vibrators included. But the idea is to understand like how all of this is affecting your biology, and to understand your biology, including your nervous system, to make you happier, calmer, last more agreeable. Not as agreeable as AI, but agreeable enough to your families and friends and coworkers so that you're not a a-hole. All right. So now, what are the mechanisms that we can kind of incorporate in organizations, in families, to help them create this kind of balance and understanding of biology, neuroscience, psychology, right? Most people, like we said, are not informed that their rash decisions, their being disagreeable, their fears are coming from a dysregulated nervous system.
So the mechanisms that they can use, I mean, first and foremost, for example, there's gadgets, technology, the AWE phone that we're selling, especially useful for children, helps mitigate not just access to AI, but also just social media in general, and helps change behaviors so that it uses operant conditioning basically to encourage you to do things that might be good for your nervous system, like reading a book, going for a walk, going to the gym, all this stuff, and it rewards you with screen time. So find a gadget, find an app as well that might limit screen time, like App Block, One Focus, One Sec. All these things are really good. I recommend them. Some you have to pay for them, but the money's worth it. And just get an understanding that we are information craving machines in a sense. And wherever we can find an outlet, right, to provide us with unmitigated access to information, our mind, it has evolved in a way to be focused on that. The same way that we are attracted to honey, right, if we find it in the environment. So unmitigated access to information from an LLM or just in the internet in general can be very harmful just because of the way that the brain has evolved. And this thing called technology is coming out of nowhere and rapidly evolving. We're ancient hardware. The brain is like an ancient piece of hardware in a extremely technologically evolved world. I mean, just be mindful of that.
Thanks for that. And when you're creating calm and perspective and happiness, we also know that this is contagious, right? So negativity is contagious, but positivity and calm also is. Peace over war, right? One person wants to fight and war, then everyone's getting agitated or anxious and ready to fight. And we've seen this in our group sessions, in our workshops, in our resets. When one or two people are getting calmer, it affects the group. And they tell us also that when they go back to work or their family and friends, like this is kind of a way that we can spread love, spread compassion, spread calm, and help people find their balance and purpose. If there's one thing that people can do before using an AI this week or next week, before using it, again, intention is important, right? So what is the intent that you're trying to get? AI cannot do everything. Remember that it has limits. It has pitfalls. Use it, but make sure that you know what your intention is. Take a deep breath and say, I'm going to use AI for this now. And then when you're done, you're done. That's good.
Being intentional, for sure. I also want to mention, one piece of advice for anybody who's listening who is a parent or individuals as well. If somebody already has psychosis or is at high risk, treat AI chatbots like high risk media, right? Similar to late night doom scrolling or high THC weed. Limit duration, but for these people, avoid companion bots that encourage intense emotional bonding. And if AI content shows up in delusions, bring that explicitly into treatment. Watch out for red flags. So increasing time alone with AI, believing that AI is special, chosen, sent by a god, or all these sort of delusions. And if they have major sleep disruption, disorganized thinking, encourage them to see a therapist immediately, or just get professional help in general. Psychiatrist or even ER if there's an acute risk. Right?
Yeah, let's make sure that our children are safe. And one thing that we've also embedded in our smartphone that is now available through our website. For more information, you can sign in to pre-order. They're just coming into North America. They're already available in Europe. We've embedded these types of safeguards for children to have access to kind of the best science integrated in a safe phone that has access to all the other features, but you can put some time limits. You can check on, and it's not to create conflict, but to create communication and shared moments and understanding. I played board games this week and laughed a lot. It was pick your poison board game, to be precise, which is quite funny and rude sometimes, but just shared laughter, right? So to compare the experience, we were 6 playing a board game versus like playing Warcraft or whichever video game that you're playing with friends. And maybe it's a violent game, maybe it's not, but whatever it is, it's not as fun as sharing laughter and shared moment and creativity with other people, right? So our phone is also designed to make you do things outside the phone. Our workshops are to help families create this play, structured play in the family, and unstructured play that children needs outside the family, with safety and understanding that child is not safe in his room with or without his phone, that he may or may not crave or not and hate you because you cut off the Wi-Fi, or you tell him he cannot or she cannot do that. So we have this kind of holistic approach from the coaching, the workshop, and the technology, the phones and AI and apps that are coming to help people understanding that it's a holistic thing. And it's not about shaming people or apps or companies. It's about understanding how to be more aware and to do better.
100%. Yeah. And encourage people to become the best versions of themselves rather than isolating and being heavily reliant on technology.
So we talked about the calm tech movement, just ending off as we're coming to the hour. What are your last thoughts about what are we doing? What can we do better? And how can we do it together? And if anyone in the audience has some thoughts or questions, you can post them right now, the Q&A, or do it privately, directly to Mark, myself, or our team at any time. Go ahead with the closing remarks.
So just one last note. So nothing here that we mentioned replaces individual medical care, but it should give you more than enough to understand schizophrenia and psychosis. And if you recognize this in somebody else, the patterns, just understand that AI can be a trigger, an amplifier, rather than necessarily a new disease. And just be very aware of the risks that AI involves. If you are in doubt, or if you know somebody close to you who might be showing signs of psychosis, go and seek medical help, right? If you can. AI is omnipresent. It's with us throughout the entire day. It's easy and accessible, and we shouldn't be entirely reliant on an AI system to solve every single problem that might come up at any moment in the day. Medical advice, going to see a psychiatrist, whether you need medication or a real therapist, is a tried and tested method, right? That has helped countless numbers of people. So rely on that instead of necessarily just relying on the AI.
And just to reiterate again, AI is not the problem. AI is a great tool. Is it dangerous? Maybe. maybe not. Everything can be dangerous. Walking down the street can be dangerous as well. We're here to kind of look at how it can be dangerous, to put safeguards, to have those discussions so that it doesn't become what we don't want it to be, and to stay grounded, right? So AI is evolving. We're helping evolve AI, and hopefully in the right direction. We have the science and tech team making the most responsible, ethical AI that takes all those studies and all those lived experience into consideration. So again, use AI responsibly. Be aware of your AI use. Be aware of your tech use. Tell us how that's affecting you. We're here to listen. We have some, as mentioned, AI that you can check tomorrow, hopefully, or this weekend. Let us know how you enjoy our specific aware AI. And also let us know, what are the other questions that you have about AI use or tech use or well-being and happiness in general. We're here every Friday to talk about those topics. And we really appreciate you being here live or watching after the live sessions. Maybe people are busy. I wish everyone a great weekend. And you can always follow us on our social media, give comments, get in touch with us and the team. And we will be back next Friday. And the topic for next Friday is willpower. So will you be there for the Willpower podcast stream?
All right. Take care, everyone. Have a nice weekend. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week for more awe and awesome conversations. Make sure to follow us and comment on your thoughts on this week's topic. I'm your happiness expert and co-host, Christian Dominic. Please find and reach out to us directly and visit our website at awedigitalwellness.com. See you next time. Thanks for your curiosity. Looking forward to your comments, and keep on smiling.